So, Grandma takes her grandson out to the beach. It's a beautiful sunny day and decides, hey, let's the little whippersnapper get out there and splash in the water. So they're sitting on the beach hanging out. Beautiful day, and all of a sudden this big wave comes in and washes her grandson out into the water. And the grandmother, in a sheer panic, gets on her knees. Dear God, dear God, dear God, please, please bring him back. And sure enough, all of a sudden, another wave comes in, and there's her grandson, good as new. And the grandmother looks down at him and says, "Where's his hat?" I think she kind of missed the point. I want to talk to you this morning about something to me that is really becoming prevalent in my life in terms of noticing a pattern that happens over and over and over again, not only in my own personal life, but also the people that I coach. And that's a concept that's called tapping the brakes. So here's the thing. The setup is this. You've got goals, you've got dreams, you've got things that you're trying to do, things that you're trying to accomplish, habits that you're trying to break. You're trying to do all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, stuff starts getting in the way that can slow you down. And we're not even aware of it. And so what's happening is you've got this momentum, the stuff is going on, you're getting stronger and stronger and stronger and better and better and better. But unconsciously what's happening is you're doing things that's causing you to tap the brakes on whatever it is you're trying to manifest in your life. And so my definition of that is unconscious thoughts that we have that slow down or stop the physical manifestation from showing up. And guess what? We all do it in different areas of our lives. We all do it. How many people would agree with that statement? Yeah, pretty much everybody, right? You're human, you're on this third-dimensional planet. It's probably happened once or twice. My guess is probably more, right? We all have these blind spots in our life. So I'm working with a client, very successful in business, but she tells me that she's feeling alone. With all the COVID-19 and everything, she just can't seem to connect with people. And I said, well, I understand. I said, so what are you doing about it? And she said, well, what I'm doing is every single week I put on my schedule a 3-hour time slot, and I make that very special for just my friends and connect. And I said, well, that sounds perfect. What's the problem? And she says, well, the problem is that every single time that time comes up, I get an email, I get a phone call, I got somebody, I got to do this, that, or the other thing. And I said, well, how often does that happen? And she said, every single time. And I said, how long has this been going on? And she said, a long time. And I sat there, and she was starting to get emotional, And I just asked her a simple question. I said, what is the message that you're telling yourself about you when you don't actually take the time to do something that's really important? What are you telling yourself about you? Silence. And after about 2 minutes and some tears, she finally said that I'm just not that important. And I share that story with you just to let you know that this is just one of the hundreds of stories that I hear that we have these unconscious patterns that when we really want to do something in our life, we really want it to show up in our lives, that what happens is we're sabotaging. In the background, we're doing things that's causing us to not manifest what it is that we're wanting to manifest in our lives, right? I love this quote by Stephen Covey. In our personal lives, if we do not develop our own self-awareness and become responsible for our first creations happen where? Right here. Our first creations in our mind, we empower other people and current circumstances to shape our lives by default. By default. Charles Fillmore says, "Know thyself" was inscribed on the temple of Apollo at Delphi, and it must be inscribed on our own temple. Our own temple is here, right? Over the door of our mind. So I got kind of curious. What is this temple in Delphi? What is all? It's actually pretty stunning. Anybody been there? It looks amazing, right? So I looked up the actual inscription, and there's the inscription. I translated it. Know thy blind spots. Know thy blind spots. Because here's the thing. If you don't know what you don't know, you're not going to be able to stop the sabotage. It all comes down to self-awareness and knowing what's going on inside before you can do something about it. That's what we're talking about here, right? Carl Jung, this is my favorite quote. If anybody gets an email from me, this is going to be at the bottom of my email. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So, here's my question to you. Where are you tapping your brakes? Now look, I'm not immune from this in any way, shape, or form. So about 2-3 months ago, I decided I really wanted to have this little workout routine that I could do on a daily basis. And so I did a bunch of research, and I put together this 15 to 20-minute workout routine, right? And it's simple. It's not anything crazy, but something. And so I started doing it. And so for like 3 or 4 weeks, I was a rock star. Perfect. And then I wasn't a rock star. And I sat there and I'm like, I don't get it. Why? Why? What happened? And so I'll tell you in a minute. But for right now, what I want to do with you is I want to take you through a little bit of an experience. So if you'll do me a favor and just get comfortable, close your eyes. And I just want you to get comfortable and get cozy and just become present. Become present to the moment. You are here now. Simply let go of the day. Thank yourself for being here. Tell your mind it's time to let go for just a minute. And now I just want you to think about the thought, where am I tapping my brakes? Where is that happening? We want to be very loving, very gentle. Remember, there's no judgment here. We don't do shame. We don't do blame. Imagine yourself just to be an observer. So I just want you to think about, where am I tapping the brakes? Pick one thing, just one. Whatever area in your life that is. Could be your health, could be finances, could be relationships, could be a new habit you're trying to form, anything. Whatever you got going on. And now what I want you to do, being that third-party observer, loving, compassion, almost like you're looking at somebody you just love and you adore. I want you to think about, what are you thinking about when this issue comes up? Again, there's no judgments. Just what are you thinking about? And then I want you just to pause for a moment and How do you feel when you think about this situation? Again, there's no right or wrong. Just be honest. What does it feel like? And now what I want you to do is I just want you to imagine for a moment, what are you telling everybody about this situation? What are the words that are coming out of your mouth when you talk to people about it or talk to yourself about it? And finally, what I want you to do is to look at your action or your inaction that you're taking as a result of this. Again, no judgment. Very loving. You're just observing. And then what I want you to do is just imagine giving yourself a hug. Thank yourself for going through that little exercise. I want you to come back, wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers, and when you're ready to open your eyes, come back to the room. How'd that go? You're still here, that's good. I didn't see anybody run out the door. That's always positive, right? Anybody know who Paul Hasselbeck is? Paul Hasselbeck is an icon in the Unity movement, in my opinion. He was the director over education for Unity schools for 20 years. He's not doing that anymore, but what he does do is he does work with the students going through the ministerial program and people who just like to do online classes. He's become a mentor of mine as I'm going through the classes in the ministerial program. And I had a class last week, and Paul was telling a story about he suffered from low self-esteem, low confidence. I'm telling you right now, if you ever are blessed enough to get to know this man, there's a lot of things that you'll say about him. I assure you, those words will never come out of your mouth in terms of low self-esteem and self-doubt. And so Paul tells a story about how it really was a big deal for him, and then all of a sudden he realized it. And I said, well, what did you do about it? And he said, well, I applied the principles of unity, the metaphysical principles of unity, and I worked on it, and I took care of it. And I said, that's awesome. And the one thing that caught my attention about his story, which I thought was so powerful, was really simple. And again, this comes down to metaphysics practice within unity. And he said, what I realized was that God is principle. One of God's principles is confidence. And so what he did is he created an affirmation for himself that he said over and over and over again. That affirmation was, God is confidence, therefore I am confident. And so what did he do? Is he simply understood the principles of God, the principles of metaphysics, and he used that to basically, if you will, become aware of a situation that he was trying to change in his life. He used his own divinity, the principles within all of us, the things that make unity so special, amazing, and incredible, and he applied them in his life, and he basically became confident. That's what happened. So he was, in a sense, tapping his brakes. Now, the one thing about him that you don't know is he was a dentist. It's not like he wasn't intelligent. He's a brilliant man, clearly, especially if you've seen all the books that he's written and what he's done in Unity. The guy is brilliant. But he suffered from this thing. And he used the principles, the metaphysical principles, to change his life. But he was tapping the brakes. He was tapping his own brakes. Why? Because he had these subconscious beliefs that were telling him that he wasn't confident, that he wasn't smart enough, that people weren't going to listen to him. Right? My wife and I were looking for a house, and we actually bought we thought we bought some land. And so in the process of buying this land, we were thinking about all the things that we were going to do with the land in terms of the house we were going to build and everything else like that. And to make a long story short, the land thing didn't happen. But in that process, we saw this amazing house. I mean, it was one of those deals. Have you guys ever had this experience where it was just like the minute you walk into a space or a situation, it was like, oh my God, this is such a yes. I mean, it just screams from your soul, like this is it. Have you ever had that experience? Yes, right? And so we had this experience, and both of us were like, we love this thing. Now, unfortunately, we couldn't buy it because it was already sold. But what it did was it just brought this feeling of we can create whatever we want to when it comes to this house that we want and the situation that we want in our life. And so as I was preparing for my talk yesterday, she said, hey, and she does this often, she says, what's your talk about? And I started telling her about tapping the brakes. And she goes, oh, she said, I'm doing it right now. I said, what do you mean? She goes, about her house. And I said, what do you mean you're tapping the brakes? Don't tap the brakes, babe. Don't tap the brakes. What are you doing tapping the brakes? We're trying to figure this thing out. And she goes, no, I really, really am. I said, well, how? And she said, and these aren't affirmative statements, but what she said is she said, I've quit acting like it's possible. I've quit acting like it's possible. And the second thing is, she wasn't taking the action anymore to make it happen. How could you possibly take action to make something happen if you don't think it's possible? Do you see the conflict? Do you see the unconscious thought patterns that was preventing this thing from happening? Do you see where she was tapping her brakes? Yeah. And we all do that. We all do that. There's these things that we really want, and yet we get going on these things, and then we start doing this crazy stuff. So go back to my story, right? I'm doing the workout thing. Everything's great for about 3 weeks until I noticed that one time when I got done, it took me like 20 or 25 minutes to do the whole thing. Guess what I started telling myself? I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do it. And so guess what happened? I wound up having that time to do it. I was just like the client that I had that was telling me, but I really, really want to do that, but then everything comes up and I can't do it. Yeah. So that's how I was tapping the brakes. That's how my wife was tapping her brakes. That's how Paul Hasselbeck was tapping his brakes. And we all do it. We all tap our brakes. We all tap our brakes, right? Here's a question for you. What would it look like if you weren't? What would it sound like if you weren't? What would that look like? What would that feel like? We're going to find out. So I want to have you go back, get comfortable, and I'm just going to have us go back into that quiet space for just a moment. Come back into the present moment. And now what I want you to do is just to think about that thing where you feel like you may be tapping your brakes. Only this time we're going to change some things. So first of all, I want you to imagine what you would be thinking regarding the situation if you weren't tapping your brakes. What would you be thinking? In other words, you're just letting it go. You're ripping it. You're going. What would you have to tell yourself differently about this situation? And then what I want you to do, how would you have to feel differently about this situation? What would it feel like? How would it feel differently? And now I want you to do is to think about what you would be saying to others about this situation if you weren't tapping the brake. How would that sound differently? And then what I want you to do is think about what actions would you be doing differently if you were no longer tapping your brake? How would that look different? And then you can slowly start to come back to the room, wiggling your fingers and your toes. And when you're ready, you can just simply open your eyes. How was that? How many people noticed a few things might have been a little bit different? Whether what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're speaking, or the actions taken, was there a difference? Yeah. If you're honest with yourself, there was. That's how it works, right? That's what's happening when we tap our brakes. We're just literally not doing something in that process I just took you through that's out of alignment with what you're trying to create. Your either thinking is off, your feeling is off, your words are off, or your action is off. Something's off when we tap our brakes. My experience has been once I become aware of that, then there's actually something I can do about it. But it starts with awareness. It starts with the understanding like, hey, this isn't happening. What am I doing to myself? How am I self-sabotaging? But I'm taking the time to figure it out. In other words, I'm doing what Paul Hasselbeck has done. I'm doing what the Fillmores have done. I'm actually doing the work of looking at my own thinking and figuring out what's going on and then using my power, my divinity, to change something that I want to change in my life. I'm standing fully in my presence and fully in my power when I do that. Versus being unconscious and letting this pattern just go on and on and on and on again. How many places, how many people in our lives have we seen that happen over and over and over again? Yeah. It's a cycle that can be broken when you really understand who and what you are. It just takes awareness. It takes consciousness. But that's the promise that we've been given because of who and what we are. Right? If you noticed in the meditation, what I had you do is pay close attention to your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, and I also added your words. So anytime you're doing this type of work, when you're thinking about tapping the brakes, those are the things that you want to start paying attention to. Where am I off? Where am I off? Right? So in wrapping things up, I just want to talk about that. So just understand that we all have these areas in our lives. It's normal. It's part of life. So you're not bad. You're not wrong. There's no shame here. There's no blame here. There's nothing. It's just a gentle observation, holding yourself compassionately and just looking at your life and going, what's going on here? Right? I'm not sure why this isn't working, but it's not. Okay, thank you. Self-awareness is the key. Self-awareness. As I continue my own spiritual journey, I'll tell you what keeps happening. Is that just about every single time I think that I'm self-aware, I realize how much I'm not. Anybody have that experience? Anybody fall into something where it's like, I had no idea this thing over that was hiding in the closet that was all dusty and hadn't been looked at for a long time, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that was there. I didn't even know that was there. So I'm doing a lot of studying for the metaphysical, the ministerial exams, and I'm also studying some other stuff with my wife. And we were talking about this idea of living in compliance and living your life in a very compliant way versus doing and living your life in a way that makes you go, oh, hell yes. And I think it's okay to say that here. Nothing's happening. I'm looking around, right? But the point is that what I realized in my life, and this to me was like a life changer. When we were sitting there talking about this just happened about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. It's like I grew up very compliant. In other words, I'm a rule follower. I just am. And there's nothing wrong with being a rule follower as long as that's where your heart's at and that's where your soul is at. And when you show up, you're present and you stand there powerfully. And it's like, this is who and what I am. But when you come at it from a standpoint of, well, there's the rules, and I don't know if I agree with them or not, but I'm going to do it, and you're not happy, and it's not you, and you're not in your full expression, there is a problem. And when she said that, it just went like, uh-oh. We've got some splaining to do, right? And it was just this awareness. And so that's what happens when we live the spiritual life. When we decide all of a sudden to live this way and to become conscious, we get to see all the stuff. We get to see the shadows. We get to do the deep work that allows us to see where we're getting stuck, where we're tapping the brakes, and then guess what? Then we can do something about it. And so guess what I'm doing about it? I'm looking at my life and go, hey, Mike, where are you living your life in compliance versus your hell yes? And then, more importantly, I'm asking myself, well, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Right? That's consciousness. That's me standing in my power, in my divinity, making a decision. That's what we're here to do. We get to do that. We get to do that, right? Ask yourself, where am I tapping my brakes? Remember, do it gently, do it slowly. Don't make it difficult. Nice and compassionately. Just imagine you're talking to a small child. I always think about that when I'm doing this kind of work. I just think about it. If there was a 5-year-old child and you were observing them, how would you observe them? And my heart immediately just goes to compassion and love. No judgment, no shame, no nothing. Right? Identify your thoughts and feelings around the area where you're tapping your brakes. So just identify them. That's what I'm doing. Okay. And then just ask yourself the question, are they in alignment with what you're trying to do and create in your life? Are they? Cool. If they're not, you might want to think about mixing things up a little bit, right? And then finally, use visualization and meditation to see a different possibility in the situation. So in other words, what we just did, is there something that might be a little bit different that you might consider doing? Maybe there is, maybe there's not. Often I find for myself there is. Yeah. Yep. The other thing that you can do is like Paul Hasselbeck did, and I really believe this, and Unity obviously believes it as well, is to create one or more affirmative statements about the situation and use it on a regular basis. Because one thing that I've noticed is it's great to have these realizations. It really is. It's cool when all of a sudden you can see your own stuff and you go, whoa, check that out. But then if you don't do anything with it at that point in time, then what's the point? So in other words, how am I going to change this thing? But more importantly, I use the language, how do you make it stick when you decide to make a change? How do you make it stick? Well, I promise you one thing. If all you've done is realize what you're trying to change and you don't do anything else, it's not going to change. Promise you that. It won't change. But if you do something where you can become aware of it, because what we're talking about are patterns. All of us are made up of a bunch of patterns. We just do it. Habits, patterns, right? And all we're trying to do in some areas of our lives are change those patterns. Well, if you only recognized it one time, excuse me, you're not going to be able to change it just by noticing it one time. There needs to be additional work. Just become aware of it. And then as you start to become aware of it, then all of a sudden you can start doing something about it and you can change your life and step back into your power. You know, I really believe that unity is one of the most beautiful ways, the most beautiful paths for your own spiritual unfolding and your own spiritual growth. It gives you the ability, if you want, to actually make a huge difference in your life. Excuse me. By taking simple principles, applying them in your life, and then you actually can go make a difference in your life, in others' lives as well. So in closing today, I just want to share with you, I have such tremendous faith in each and every one of you. And I look at the divinity in this room and outside of this room and in this world. Because what I know without a shadow of a doubt is every single person has that within themselves, and every single person, should they choose, can become conscious and make a huge difference in their lives and impact those around them. And I believe that's why I'm here, and I also believe that's why everybody in here and watching out there is here, is to make a difference. We all want to make a difference. And I believe even further that the reason we're here right now, with all the craziness that's going on out there, we signed up for this. I honestly, in my heart and soul, believe that. We signed up to be here right now for a very, very important reason. You are needed. You are needed. We are all needed. This thing isn't going to happen on its own. You're needed. So whatever your expression is, whatever that looks like, and everybody's expression is different, I would encourage you to continue to look for the things that are going on. Look at what's happening. See where you're tapping your brakes. Take a look at it. Don't be afraid of it. Don't do it in fear. Don't do it in shame. Don't do it in blame. Don't do it in guilt. But do an honest evaluation and then change. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Yeah, there may be some tears. Yeah, it might take a little bit of work. But here's my question. Aren't you worth it? Really, aren't you worth it? I think you are. I really do. I really do. So, the lesson for the day is to quit tapping your brakes. God bless. I'm going to take our prayer box in our hands, and at the same time, we also do our love offering. So, if you can imagine that we have people that send in their prayer requests. So we say our prayer for the people that have sent in their requests, and at this time, we also do our love offering at the same time, and just understand that we don't have the normal basket that we're passing around. But there's a lot of different options that we have in terms of giving. You can do it online at our website. You can do it on YouTube. There's a direct link. You can do it on your phone. There's a lot of ways to give. And we are tremendously, tremendously, tremendously grateful for all your gifts. We're just grateful for that. We just want you to know how important you are through everything that you do to support this ministry. So thank you for doing that. But together, we take these thoughts and prayers, we take our love offering, and together we say, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive.